Joshua Jake. Today, we are going to be talking about Sam Bankman-Fried finally being sentenced, updates on Israel and Palestine. We're going to be talking about the most recent FOMC meeting at the Fed, discussing the unemployment numbers. And then we're going to touch on some political stuff, going over the upcoming Virginia elections and how Virginia's elections are actually going to be a microcosm for the rest of the national elections. So welcome, Josh. What's going on?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing today?
I'm tired. It's Friday. People are already hitting it for the holidays. So already things are slowing down. People are like, let's just talk in January. So I'm like, damn it. Okay. So that I can't believe that 2023 is almost over. And I feel like 2024 is going to be never ending with the elections. I feel like we've been
Yeah.
living in 2024 with the election cycle.
It's all a paradigm shift right now. Ever since 2020, it's just been it feels like every single quarter is an entire year at this level.
Yeah.
It's just we're advancing at a faster pace than ever. And to the question you asked me how I'm doing, I said, I was like, I just got the notification of another U.S. base being striked right now in Syria. Now, I would take that with a grain of salt because I haven't verified it, and you know how news media outlets work. But that was what kind of delayed my response there. But dude, yeah, it's quarterly years at this point.
Yeah, so let's open up, I think, with Sam Bankman-Fried, because that's, I know, close to the heart of the crypto Web3 community. I wrote an article when all this was going down that I actually didn't think he was going to be sentenced. And I know, of course, the lawyers can try to fight his current sentencing. I think it's like 105 years in prison. Very dramatic. Only took the jurors probably 5 hours, I think, to come to a decision. The most interesting play is always the behind the scenes stuff. So I think everyone watching and who watches our stuff should be very well aware that Sam Bankman-Fried was an idiot. And then when I say an idiot, not an idiot for getting caught, he was not smart enough to do this all by himself. We've seen where the money flowed in, where the money flowed out. We've seen his political donations. And so my general theory is in politics, especially, you'll often cut deals and say, hey, we're going to do something illegal, but we're going to help you get away with it if you get caught. But you can only do that to a certain degree. I mean, a good example for the past probably 30 years was Epstein, right? The guy was able to get away with what he was able to get away with in Hollywood in the political world because
Yeah.
people allowed him to, right? So the big thing was I think Sam Bankman-Fried was kind of the new Epstein in a lot of ways, moving money, moving people, whatever that means. And so to see him get sentenced is very interesting because it shows you that they really, in my opinion, have to save face, right? And show that, hey, this actually blew up too big for us to even help you. Now, once again, he's been sentenced. You know, it could be a very friendly sentencing. It could be 105 years on a nice private island. It could be 105 years where, you know, he's really living a cushy lifestyle. Or it's like 10 years in prison and the rest on probation. You know, like who knows how it's actually going to turn out. But the fact that they brought the hammer down is very interesting to me.
Yeah, so it was 7 counts of he was brought charges on 7 different counts. He was guilty on all remarks, did not get anything kind of leveled out from the judge that decided these decisions. But ultimately, the focus here isn't necessarily on Sam. I've always thought he was going to go to prison. I don't think it's necessarily going to be the full 112 or 117 years that he's facing. Like you said, whether it's a probation, a $10 million fine, or a slap on the wrist, that is something we will know as of next week. But right now, what I think is taking place is they're using Sam Bankman-Fried as the fall guy. You know, while every ounce of my body does not respect him, I think he's a little grifting rat, essentially. There's
Yeah.
no good value to this human. He has taken advantage of individuals. I do unfortunately sympathize for the fact that I do believe his network and his parents and the people around him, his lawyers, his CPAs, etc., they took massive advantage from him from both a political perspective and a monetary perspective. And so, you know, I would like to see the outcome of this. To me, it seems like he is doing exactly, of course, what his lawyers are saying: deny, deny, deny. Didn't know, didn't know, didn't know. And his parents are going to get away with this. I think both his parents are lawyers, if I'm not mistaken, or one's definitely a very higher up lawyer and the other one's very involved politically. You know, when you're looking at that perspective and the amount of dark money he invested into certain administrations and political groups, and even looked to offer $5 billion to Donald Trump just to not run for presidency, really makes you understand. Okay, this is 27-year-old guy. I don't think he's that much older than that, who's clearly dumb as a rock. I mean, he's never ran a successful business in his life. He was money laundering, committing fraudulent activities with investor funds on multiple different scales. This was not a smart individual, and he was doing things that he thought were smart because he was being advised to do so. He didn't know any better. So, of course, when he gets his money, he's being told to fly private jets and, take 200 different trips. He's going to do so. So I think he deserves jail time for every single aspect in that relating to that factor, as he just had no common sense, no critical thinking, and wasn't able to make his own decisions for himself. But I would like to see again. I think 117 years is too harsh of a sentence. I don't know if 10 years or 20 years or 30 years is the right sentencing here, but I believe there's people behind the scenes pulling the strings that honestly probably deserve more jail time than Sam Bankman-Fried himself.
So that is so spot on. I 100% agree. I mean, I think the goal is make his sentencing so extreme and so rewarding to the people that got affected and hate what happened that they're not even going to question the people who are pulling the strings. So once again, there's no way this kid was smart enough to be doing this on his own, and we know that for a fact. We know that for a fact that his parents were close with Gary Gensler. They were close with various political factions, primarily on the Democratic side, were
Yep.
part of Democratic nonprofits. So it's amazing to me that essentially whatever deals were cut were, hey, we're going to make this suck for Sam, but it's going to keep the rest of y'all safe. And so they had to throw him under the bus. Now, once again, we'll see what that actually looks like a year from now. And for all you know, Biden could commute his sentence too, right? You never know how these things are going to play out. But I think that's a great point. I think this is distracting from the real people, like his parents, like some of his accountants and financiers, who are the ones actually pulling the strings. And that should show you how this actually works. It shows you that how our court system works, how our political system works. Who was he talking with? He wasn't running it on his own. We have proof that for the majority of the time, the dude was playing video games, right? So while he's over there, was it League of Legends
Yep. Yep.
or Dota? Yeah, I was like, so he's playing League of Legends. He's not actually doing anything. What's even fishy is how he actually made his money. And there have been theories, oh, he was some genius arbitrage. Even that is like, okay, it's like his money came out of nowhere. It's so very obvious to me that this was a giant money movement scheme that got caught, probably some kind of proxy war between the US government and China. Because I think CZ, even though they say he's Canadian or from Singapore or whatever, I do believe that Binance is an arm of Chinese network and used to do things that the state of China wants. Any
Yeah.
any kind of application or business like that normally is. It's pretty common knowledge. So to see that proxy war get set up and then just to see them essentially get broken up on the U.S. side and use Sam as their fall guy, it's like we definitely haven't even scratched the surface on this. But I'm not sure the courts or the public are going to care to go any further.
Yeah, something you've actually taught me, and I've actually got to learn with the FBBA and just meeting with politicians and understanding kind of the behind the scenes or behind the headlines, so to speak, of what actually goes on within these groups. It's very clear to me that the PR releases around his arbitrage trading were done by PR representatives that are on a political scale and not from just a regular media perspective, because they understand the trajectory and traction they can get in a community that is very low
Yeah.
IQ. And I don't mean that in the sense of, and sorry, low IQ is the wrong word. Uneducated is the right word. A lot of the 99% of the crypto industry and a lot of the investors jumping into this industry are purely speculative investors. They're just pretty much gamblers with a massive addiction. And that's not me necessarily bagging on them, but they're trying to argue that crypto is some breakaway from this traditional financial banking sector and that it's going to be a solution to things like the money printing and inflation and arbitrary trading and hedge funds and etc. And the reality is that this entire world is the same world with a few different loopholes that allow them to do it on a way larger scale. So it's not
Yep.
solving anything, it's creating more issues. Just exactly to the point of you talking about Binance. And I actually do have the direct connection with you with China. Their newest stablecoin issuer is First Digital, which came out of nowhere, left field, another PR move by massive political players and market makers that understand this game. And while retail traders are just flooding to it, utilizing it because they're giving them like zero fees, they're incentivizing to use this token, deposit this token, buy Bitcoin with this token. They don't realize that 100% of that supply, and I'm sorry, 99.7% of the supply is all controlled by Binance. And this is a Hong Kong based stablecoin issuer. It's a digital asset trust that we're trusting to give us a third party audit and review on them holding one-to-one backing of US treasuries. Now, last time I checked, auditing China is next to impossible.
Yep.
So, this is another trust me bro source. Where did this First Digital come from? the CEO and these founders, it's very hard to find really any information on them. And out of nowhere, they went from a nobody stablecoin to giving Binance 100% of the supply, and in June becoming one of the largest volume-based stablecoins. Yeah, there's interesting connections there. There's a house of cards that's standing there. And again, it just is the same thing we saw with FTX and the arbitrage and the PR, right? They know how to attack the industry with PR. They want to prop it up and they make CZ look like this hero, just like they did to SBF. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the same story and it's going to end in the same way as SBF and FTX, but there's a lot of questions that are brought to light from that. And it's very, very obvious there's ties to the CCP and there's ties to foreign money and monetary incentives that the United States is not going to like.
People have to understand that when government is coming down on something like the cryptocurrency Web3 industry, they are more often than not already utilizing it for themselves. So, for example, the most recent thing is Elizabeth Warren and some Democrats in Congress, majority of Democrats, are trying to say that there's a link between funding Hamas through cryptocurrency, even though it's like 1%, if even. But what you have to understand is there's a very high chance that the US government itself is actually using cryptocurrency to fund certain operations around the world. There's no doubt in my mind. And that's the same with the Chinese. That's the same with the Russians, right? By now, it's mainstream enough that definitely some of these markets are being manipulated by governments. I have no doubt in my mind. And I can't prove that, but the strategy is there. It's very simplistic. It's very easy to use. Now, US dollars are still the easiest way to fund alternative organizations, so to speak, but you can still do it through cryptocurrency if you so choose. So, I mean, coming off of that, I definitely, the one note that I think is interesting is this. Anytime someone is propped up by the media or a political party, there's a deal struck. We don't know what the deal is, but you know there's a deal struck. Anytime someone is punished, it disincentivizes people in the future to then work on behalf of those types of people. So the next time a Sam Bankman-Fried is going to be propped up, the person in Sam's position is going to think, well, what did you do to the last guy? Do I really want to take that deal? And that's kind of the issue that they have to play, because we prop up, we being the establishment, the US, governments in general, prop up people all the time. But in order to encourage people to be propped up, you have to say nothing's going to happen to you. And you need proof and evidence of that. So it's going to be very hard for them to find similar Sam Bankman-Fried type people, I think, going forward, if they let him serve out that full year prison term. So, or, you know, maybe this is a sign that, hey, if you are the parents and you want to sacrifice your kid to the system, the parents will have money and your kid will just go to jail. And maybe a lot of parents are okay with that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's a two-party system here. There's the one outlook of, yeah, they were trying to take advantage of the industry and do exactly that you just broke down, use them as an example. There's the other factor of this as well, is that, you know, I think there's a lot more ties and regulations to the industry with current government bodies, whether it's the SEC or the DOJ or the Department of Defense. We don't necessarily know. But, you know, one of my favorite examples is I'm always saying, oh, North Korean hackers are stealing hundreds of millions of dollars. It's like, okay, you read those articles and I'm like, okay, can you show me the evidence in blockchain routing to these actual hackers, that these blue hacker groups that actually stole these funds? What are these wallets going to? How does the United States know these are hacker wallets? Where's the traction? Where's the evidence? I want to see like the beginning to the end. And no one ever questions it. They just go, oh, yeah, North Korea, obviously stealing money. And I'm sure they are. But that just gives the United States and these regulatory bodies more rights and control over creating more regulations for the on ramps and off ramps that has to do with everything crypto. You don't think the government's been doing this for over a decade, right? They took down Silk Road. They had pushed initiatives. They probably own a couple of these exchanges. You have InQtel from the CIA, which is a major investment group with Palantir. You don't think they're tracking with SaaS models the transactions and boundaries and barriers of where crypto is being spent? It's very convenient that we're able to track crypto being spent, for Hamas funding terrorist groups, and then get to publicize that and make another reason for us to invade and just prop up things like genocide, right? There's a lot of things that allow the United States and current politicians. When you guys see things happening in the news, every single media outlet, right? We have domestic terrorism on the rise. Now saying the Hamas has infiltrated things like our water systems in the United States. I'm like, okay, we're talking less than 2 million Palestinians. This is going to roll over perfectly into the next conversation. You know, we're talking about 2 million in open air prison. And we had open borders conveniently with the Biden administration for the last year and a half because we have stupid politicians like AOC with loud ass mouths that don't understand economics at all, just trying to intake as much people as possible so we can spend more on fucking taxes. We get stuck in this endless route. And now they're saying, oh, you know what? Let's take the focus away from the recent issue, which is, hey, own your shit for voting Democrat on this administration last fucking cycle, and just admit that you were wrong. The immigration policies, the foreign diplomacy, the international relations was all abysmal. But now instead of focusing on that, we're focusing on voting for that same administration because they're going to fix and keep us protected from the Hamas that have infiltrated on a domestic terrorist level. And it's like, okay, well, that's convenient, right? That's taking all of the focus away from previous issues that we've been screaming about for the last 4 years. And now it's refocusing it and blaming an entire new group in Middle Eastern country, in retrospect. And it's like, okay, what's really going on here and what's, actually being pulled behind the scenes?
It's fascinating. Before we touch on
I know
Israel and Palestine, yeah, no, I just read an article talking about how a bunch of U.S. city mayors are meeting with the Biden administration to talk about the illegal immigration problem.
Mhm.
But what they're saying is they're not saying we need to get rid of these people. They're saying, how can we get these people jobs? Now, notice that. So they're saying, how can the federal government help us keep these people here so they can start working? Which is very interesting when you understand that these cities are already in economic upheaval. The current citizens there, the unemployment continues to be high, and they're not asking for the flow to stop. They're simply saying, how can we get these people jobs and actually get them to stay here? Because they know it means more votes. So I was just watching the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, question, I think, Jerry Nadler. And he was saying, Congressman Nadler, people who are not citizens can now vote in New York City. And Nadler goes, no, they can't. He's like, well, I'm reading a mandate that says you can now vote for the mayor of New York if you're not a citizen. And Nadler goes, oh, I thought you meant in the general elections. Yeah, they can vote in the mayor elections in New York City, right? This is all coming after the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, campaign finance lady, literally just had her house raided by the FBI for campaign finance regulations. I think using a construction company as a shell organization for what, Turkish money?
I don't remember what the money was, but I remember the story. Yeah, it's just like, are you kidding me? And people don't realize that, yeah, this is a completely new influx of voters, and the mainstream media has done a very good job portraying that, where the average American doesn't believe their vote even matters. And this is where they're so far from wrong. The mainstream media has allowed and effectively controlled. That is, I don't know what psychological warfare that was embedded on and how that got pushed through the mainstream media, but you can easily take over districts. It does not take that many votes to, lean a party one way or another. And New York is arguably one of the best districts at doing so, for exactly saying what you're saying with the allowing illegal immigration to vote.
It really is. It's mind-boggling in a lot of ways, and in some ways, it's not mind-boggling at all when you understand the psychology behind some of these leaders. But touching on, let's go back to Hamas and Israel. Okay, so we're seeing updates every day, new bombings, new this, new that.
Yeah.
Here's where I'm interested. I continue to be interested. If we attack, okay, so America and Russia are already at war over Syria, and Assad has essentially won that, right? Because we didn't overthrow, right? Russia kept them in, and that was Russia's main goal. So now we're starting to bomb Syrian targets, and Syrian targets are starting to bomb American targets. Russia's definitely involved in that. If we attack Iran, you can guarantee it's going to be a second Ukraine, almost harder than Ukraine. Iran is very mountainous, right? You're taking a ginormous Afghanistan-like country and going to war with it. It's not like Ukraine where there's plenty of flat farmland, right? It is incredibly tough, and Iranians have been preparing for war for a very long time. There's no doubt in my mind that China and Russia would start funding Iran if we attack them. So there's this really tricky situation continuing to go on. Further, I still don't know how Turkey's going to play out, and I'm really curious to see what Egypt's going to do. Egypt said they're not taking in any Gazans. No one wants Gazans, which means they're essentially stuck there. But the Arab world in general continues to get more and more pissed off about what's going on. And the leaders in the Arab world know if they don't do something, then they could be overthrown, just like in the Arab Spring. So my bet is if this escalates, this might be the first time that we are kind of formally, although informally, going to war with both China and Russia, because China needs the oil. China is not going to back Israel at all. China cares more about Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iran than they do Israel strategically. So they're going to back anyone in the Middle East, which leaves us with Israel going after Iran. And if Israel currently is bogged down by Hamas and Hezbollah, it's going to be just the US, right? I don't know how effective European countries are going to get. They can't even push Putin out of Ukraine. That's pretty much all us. So I don't see the game theory behind us doubling down and actually winning in any scenario.
I mean, yeah, that's the kind of the biggest debate across the floor right now. A lot of people don't realize Iran, it would be a direct proxy war between China and the United States. They're funding, I think, at 14% or more. It might be upwards of 25% of all production for crude oil, which is through illegal measures and sanctions that are bypassed into China, and they're the largest exporter. That's going to be their largest trading partner. So, of course, China is going to be directly involved with everything that's taking place there. You brought up a great point with Syria, though. This also goes into Yemen. This also goes into any surrounded Arab country that is involved with the Middle Eastern conflicts. And there's whether it's the Hezbollah or it's going to be the Palestinians through the Hamas. And again, that's completely separate. You don't want to put them together. Hamas is a terrorist organization that's separate from that. The United States likes to make it and portray it as, well, they were democratically elected in Gaza. Well, it's an open air prison with 90% of the water supply is controlled by Israelis, and then their food and export is all controlled by Israel as well. So it's like, okay, how much power and control or how much choice do you actually really have when you're put into a scenario that's so violent? And so, what's taking place here, you made a good point, right? Because Ukraine's another example. This is still a forever war. And the only people that are really going to profit off this are going to be your asset management companies and your military industrial complex. They want a larger, longer war because that means they get to demolish an entire country and then invest on the back end because they're going to completely indebt them through World Bank loans and get to build and fund all of the rebuilding of infrastructure in these countries and democratize it, right? That is what the United States does. That's what democracy is. It's an economic hitman policy. These countries never just accept democracy. It's forced through many different ways, and the United States has failed in many ways through Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, everything through the oil wars in the 2000s. And so, Ukraine is like, oh, you have people like Nikki Haley. We need to push Putin out. We need to get them out of Ukraine. The reason why I don't think European countries, I think they understand this. They know that there's no winning there's no winning in any war, first and foremost. But against Putin, one of the largest nuclear arsenals on the planet, even if we do get to push him out all the way from Ukraine, what would stop him from being the first issuer to utilize nukes? And we see nuke tensions rising massively. People backing out of nuclear, non-testing nuclear deals, which was Russia. That is Putin directly. You have China now increasing their arsenals. You have the United States that just released a new nuclear bomb. Yeah, that came out of thin air. No, I'm sure we have a dozen new ones that they're going to announce slowly over the coming years. And so the only way out of this is through diplomatic measures and peace treaties. And that is giving up certain territories in Ukraine over to Putin. That is stopping NATO from progressing towards the east or towards Moscow. And that's us kind of pumping the brakes on the control of what the Mossad really is, which is what RFK said. It's a land aircraft carrier that allows us to control and consume the oil embargoes and everything we put back in the 1970s and have control a lot over the oil sector. Where the United States is failing is those sanctions that we've been putting on these countries. Iran has very similar sanctions to Russia. They got around them. Russia is getting around them. And so this is where the China tariffs and sanctions that we're putting on their economy are coming into play now. It's why we're doing things like the Semiconductor Chips Plan 4 Act. It's why we're trying to chokehold their economy. And it's this grounds race. As they try to develop their Belt and Road Initiative, they are proxying and funding these, they're going to be funding Iran. And this is where the question is this actually, you have people like Nikki Haley or Graham trying to say that China is funding the Hamas, that they're funding the Hezbollah. And it's like, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be just Western propaganda or what the full truth or extent to that is, because the United States is funding Israel. We're funding Mossad, who has been literally just killing Palestinians for decades and doing the same thing, but from an opposing factor and justifying it from a Western front. So from a realist perspective, you're 100% right. There is no winning or any outcome of this where, the United States gets the upper hand. It needs to be settled through diplomatic peace treaties and just actually have strong, open trading arrangements. And of course, that would save globalization as a whole.
I saw recently Spain and Belgium have increased their LNG imports from Russia. So I'm just like, it's so funny because they're still reliant on Russian oil. They're still importing Russian oil, yet Europe is saying we're aligned with Ukraine. A lot a lot of things don't make sense. A lot of things don't make sense to us because we're thinking logically. We're not thinking like the people in power who have very specific objectives, right? And their objectives aren't necessarily what's good for the US or good for the country. It's very narrowly good for what's going to enrich this political party, what's going to enrich these certain asset managers. And once you kind of follow that and understand that, you go, okay, that makes no logical sense. But it does if you don't actually care about, the state of the country, right? And that's still something that's hard for, I think, a lot of people to grasp because they're always telling me, well, that doesn't make logical sense. Why are we doing X or why are we doing Y? It's like, it doesn't
Nobody
have
funded
to.
by the military industrial or on the board of Raytheon should be making decisions on how we should actually, proceed in war. And if it's increasing violence, like that's a conflict of interest, and
Yeah.
that exists on all measures in our Congress or on our in a political spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, 100%. And boy, I can't wait to see what this is going to do to oil prices, right? If we actually do decide to cut off supply and start bombing Iran's oil facilities. Oh boy, that's going to be awesome. We already have supply chain problems. Oil is already expensive. We've already used our strategic reserves multiple times to try to keep it artificially low for certain election cycles. Awesome, right? So I guess that'll be a good tie into the economy as a whole. I know we just had the FOMC meeting. We're pausing interest rates, so I hear, right, to I think 5.5 or 5.25. So they're saying that the unemployment rates continue to go down and that the economy is robust. So that's why they're not going to raise interest rates. They think they have inflation under control, from what I understand, because they follow the Phillips curve. Are you familiar with the Phillips curve?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, so the Phillips curve, for those who don't know, is just there's an inverse direct relationship between unemployment and inflation. The idea is that when the economy is quote unquote overheated, which means everyone has a good paying job, everyone's consuming, everyone's buying things, inflation spikes, right? Costs of goods go up. Therefore, when no one has a job, when everyone's doing poorly, inflation goes down. But obviously, that isn't necessarily true. And even though that's what the Fed views as true and judges things by, we are currently in a time and have been times in the past where inflation is high and unemployment is high. And that's why I think even right now, inflation is high and unemployment is high, and we're just fudging the numbers.
Unemployment's low. Unemployment's low.
Yeah, unemployment is
3.9%.
What is
Unemployment's
it?
Let me look at the exact rate.
They say it's 4%, right? 3.4%.
It's 3.9% right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. If you just look at the mass layoffs, how do you have all these mass layoffs? So here's what economists are doing now. Because of course, once unemployment numbers are released, what happens? Because we have the jobs report, right, where they talk about non-farm jobs. Every month they re-release those job reports, and every month they reduce the size of jobs that are created to the point where economists on average are saying whatever the current jobs number is, subtract about 150,000, right? Because on average, there's about 100,000 jobs that are being underperformed or taken off the list 2 months when they've done the second round of research, but that never gets reported, right? If you look at the state of the economy, it doesn't feel like unemployment's low, right? And then you get into the whole, well, what is employment? What is underemployment?
Yeah.
Working 2 extra jobs is not an extra job we add to the list for consumers, right? If you have to have 2 jobs, that's not a good sign. So I think we're in a time right now, just by looking at your grocery store and off anecdotal evidence, which I think there's plenty of if you just check the job numbers instead of the unemployment rate, which can be fudged, we seem to be in a period of high inflation and high unemployment. I don't believe the 3%, 3.4% number. I think we're much higher. I saw a number for a certain economist. I have to remember her name, but she was saying that she believes, employment. Some economists are saying it's 7.5%. Dr. Heidi Shearholtz, a director of policy at the Economic Policy Institute, she's saying 7.5. Right? To me, that sounds a lot more accurate, and that's just unemployment. That is not underemployment, which dictates people who aren't at their maximum potential. And it also doesn't count people who have given up and are outside the labor force now. So that's not even talking about the labor force participation rate.
Yeah, it's also not including the my favorite metric to follow is going to be the rise in wages. So like right now, year over year, wages are dropping against inflation still massively. I follow the wage versus prosperity gap. I think it's the most important because what that's going to tell us is, all right, we have, apparently we have record unemployment, right? We have a really strong base economy. We're at 3.9%. We had a 4.9% GDP growth for quarter three. And it's like, okay, well, let's understand where that's coming from. Because when you look at your credit card debt, your household debt, your credit card limits, your credit card spending, all of that is going parabolic. It's a parabolic rise right now, which means that, yes, we are seeing multiple, or well, not multiple, we're seeing everyday Americans, the average, the middle class, the poverty, etc. All it means is that, yes, there's consumer spending, but it is just the ultra wealthy and the magnificent seven or the top shareholders in stock companies of the world that are profiting the most. They're consuming the consumer. And that's because a lot of these numbers are adjusted based off not having the cost of foods or shelter or utilities involved with the everyday inflation numbers. They try to take these out a lot of the time and renegotiate or redetermine the actual definition of what inflation is or what unemployment is or what wages or what any median rate or household good is. And so, we are starting to see some cracks here, which are optimistic, but I 100% agree with the factor that they are misguiding everybody at the current state of the economy. 4.9% is usually amazing. That is amazing economic growth. But in today's world, after we just printed $9 trillion and we watch our credit limits, we watch our debt limits, we watch our spending limits, we see now we have to start paying back our college student loans. As all this comes back, it's just like you mentioned. The jobs economy is people taking on 1, 2, 3 extra jobs just so that way they can get by, so they can afford their cost of rent, they can afford their cost of goods, they can afford their food. Mortgages are ridiculous. It's going to be an 8%. I'm sure they'll peak around 10% for just picking up a mortgage. It's going to be impossible to buy a home, which means asset managers are going to continue to come in with cash offers and consume more single family homes, making it harder and forcing people to rent even more in the future. This is everything you're saying is 100% true. And what I would take away from the FOMC meeting is going to be that exact stance that they keep standing by the fact that we have a strong job-based economy. We have low unemployment. And this is what we have to really watch as we see inflation still persisting and continue to remain sticky. We can move towards a stagflated economy. And this is where Jerome Powell, I feel for the man. I don't necessarily think this is all his fault whatsoever because they are a private entity. Obviously, they're very correlated to the United States government, but they're also very correlated to BlackRock. BlackRock is going to be their top advisor. They have managed most of their funds. They helped them through COVID. They bailed them out in 2008. This is who they call. They call Larry Fink when they're in a time of crisis. And so, with that outlook, it's like, okay, who does this benefit? Why would they want to constrain those numbers? And it's ultimately going to be because of Operation Choke Point 2.0. We're seeing regional banks just continually get disrupted, be forced out. They're going to close, be absorbed by a BNY Mellon. They're going to be absorbed by JP Morgan. They're going to be absorbed by Wells Fargo. And while nobody's even talking about that, by the way, no one's realizing that these regional banks, the only option is for them to sell out to the higher bidders, centralizing, creating more of a monopolization. This just happened with Exxon. Exxon just had like a $60 billion acquisition for one of the largest fracking or scaling sites for oil production. That's going to completely monopolize that industry over time. Oil providers getting more centralized, pharmaceutical companies getting more centralized through COVID. Everything is becoming more centralized and more monopolized. And so while you have a 4.9% increase in GDP, that actually just means that the wealth gap, the 99% is becoming the 0.01%. And then the 99% is becoming the 99.9%, and the 1% is becoming the 0.01%. And it's increasing that wealth gap in America. So yeah, there's a lot you can take away from the FOMC meeting, but really all I took away from it was rates are pausing for a longer period of time. If our government and these asset managers actually care about Americans, it's very unfortunate. We have to raise them and keep them higher for longer because we need to increase unemployment, and unemployment needs to go up. They need to stop fudging the numbers. We need the economy to have a healthy retracement, and we need to disrupt the monopolization that's taking place in the United States.
I think one of the most important numbers is, like I said, the labor force participation rate. As of October 2023, it's 62%. Round up to 63 because it's 62.7. You're telling me that 37% of Americans are in the labor force? 37%. Or outside of the labor force. So 37% of Americans aren't working at all. And of that 62, how many are government workers, right? How many of them are actually private sector people? You could probably cut that in half. Even if we say 20%. Okay, so you're telling me 40% of Americans are supporting 60% of the economy, right? That is not good. That is not good at all, right? And I think that I just read an article today. There were about 50,000 truckers just laid off as of like this week, right? Truckers. Trucking is an indication of supply chain logistics and transit, consumer demand. If truckers are being laid off, that is not a good economic sign. Not to mention that trucking is one of the few blue collar jobs that actually pays well,
Yeah.
right? So not only are you crushing that middle class, it's an indicator of how the rest of the economy is going to go. Not good. Not good. And this is all going to affect elections. I'm going to pull up. I was reading an article. Here's what's important. We're going to pivot to what's going on in Virginia. All you need to know is that Virginia is having their elections, right? On November 7th, Virginia elections are going to be held. Why is this important? Biden won Virginia in 2020. But then soon after, like in 2021 or 2022, Virginia went straight red. Every large cabinet position under the governor, including the governor, went Republican. Right? They had some changes in laws around ballot signatures, and after that change, for whatever reason, Virginia went very, very red. So in Virginia, the Republicans and Democrats are holding on really thin majorities in the House and Senate. What that means is there's literally small counties in Virginia that are receiving massive amounts of money from the Democrat and the Republican parties to figure out if they can control the Virginia legislature. Why is this a big deal? One of the things that we don't always understand is when we're looking at the large political spheres, we're focused on the presidential elections. But for example, if Republicans are able to flip about 2 Democratic seats in the state of Virginia, they're going to control the whole legislature, which means that Youngkin can make any reforms that he wants within reason, which could potentially involve reforms that give Republicans more power, which could also help Virginia go for whatever the Republican is in the next election cycle. We know what states do have a large impact on presidential election cycles. And Virginia is a big state, traditionally viewed as a swing state, is now pretty solidly blue in presidential elections, but because of Youngkin, seems to be trending red in certain areas. Most of the suburbs that they're going to be competing on are right outside the DC area. Some of them are very, very affluent suburbs. So Virginia is going to tell us in a short way what 2024 is going to look like, because these elections are testing grounds for talking points for 2024. Right now, one of the biggest talking points in Virginia is abortion. Republicans want a 15-week abortion ban, and they're saying that that is a compassionate compromise, right? They don't want to go beyond 15 weeks is what they're saying, but they want a 15-week abortion ban, which depends. That's actually very popular among a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans aren't, we want to ban abortion completely, and a lot of them aren't, well, we don't want up until a partial birth abortion. A lot of Americans fall into that like 15, 20-week range, right? So that's the quote unquote moderate position, I think, among the majority of polls in America. So if Republicans and Democrats are running on that, depending on who wins these seats, is going to be very interesting. Also, one thing that you'll find fascinating is one of the state senators running is a former CIA agent. So that to me is very interesting because we have actually seen an uptick of the amount of Intel officials that have run for office in the past 2 decades. And it's very hard to tell sometimes if they are former Intel analysts and not current ones, if you catch my drift. But I found that very interesting. And of course, it's a very DC thing, right? Because that's where a lot of the Intel agencies are based. So maybe that makes sense for someone of that stature to be running. But it's just very interesting. So I'm really interested to see how Virginia goes. Youngkin is discussed as being a possible presidential runner, right? If DeSantis fails and flops. I don't think he's going to enter the race, but he does need to figure out something else to do. He may try to run for Senate. I have to look and check and see if Senate is even up for grabs. In Virginia this year, I need to recheck the election maps. I think there is a chance that he might challenge. I think his name's Tim Kaine. I forget. I can't remember if I'm looking at the last cycle or the cycle now, but
Yeah, send me
this is
that. Send that over to me. That's interesting. Because it goes to show too, just the level of, I don't want to say corruption. I don't necessarily know if CIA or people of intelligence communities should be running for at representing. They just shouldn't be representatives of the people, the common people. And that's just because they are trained in psychological warfare. They're trained in manipulation. They're trained in intelligence. Acts. This is their jobs. This is their livelihood. So, like you mentioned, are they are they former intelligence or are they current intelligence? What is this a part of? Who are their connections? What is this meant to do? So that's very interesting. And to be honest, though, I think you'd be able to tell if he loses, then he's definitely not part of the intelligence committee. If he wins, then I would it would just feed back more into okay, how did they get this? How did they take this over? District by district, etc. Um, yeah, so we got to look over. I need to look over the election maps here again too. So we should probably do a deep dive on that soon because we need to start in January, probably going over electoral just divisions and going over districts and who could take over what. Because Iowa was huge this month. Ron DeSantis took about a tie, I believe, with Trump. Correct? The short term polls. I don't think it's over yet, but
no, I don't think it is either. Although a lot of people are saying that Nikki Haley is now overturning him
that's
in
not.
Iowa.
Is a lot of people saying that, or is that just Raytheon's news outlets saying that?
I know,
Dude,
I
I
know, isn't that
hate.
funny?
It's terrible how much platform she's getting because of her connections and her donors. Uh, it's outrageous, and
Okay,
it's so sad that Americans don't even realize what's taking place.
so I was right. Tim Kaine is up for re-election in the Senate in Virginia,
Okay,
and so if Republicans do well November 7th, I think Governor Youngkin, because in Virginia governors are one term, I think he's going to try to run for Senate and take on Tim Kaine.
interesting. And he's Democrat.
Tim Kaine's a Democrat, Youngkin's a Republican.
He's a Republican, and so Duncan's Democrat, the CIA, right?
No, sorry. This is the Congressional Senate.
Oh,
The CIA, I was talking about a state Senate seat.
gotcha.
And
Who's
that
that? Who's running
state,
that?
on the state Senate side,
Yeah.
I can pull up, what's the lady's name? Let's see. I just had it up here. Shoot. No, I got rid of it. But
You're all good. We'll break it down. We'll break it down state by state. We need to run like a NBA Finals list platform and just like do a breakdown and do a bracket.
It's going to be easier once the presidential primaries are over. But we are starting to see those moves. And I definitely want to do an episode of that where I kind of go over, because the Senate is 33, what is it? It's 33, 33, 33, right? Roughly. So every cycle, a completely different group of senators are up for election. And so that's kind of what's fascinating, interesting. Like in Florida, we just have Rick Scott, who's up, who I think will win pretty handily in Florida. But you have a lot of blue states that are trying to defend their blue senators. And so that's where Republicans are obviously going to try to take a lead. So it's going to be very interesting to see if the Senate changes hands.
I have to show you a meme I just got sent. It's funny as hell.
True.
But I agree. I just saw this and it cracked me up.
I know, isn't that crazy?
For Israel's border. Yeah, no, I completely agree, though. We should definitely start running that down. And I know we will because we got some things coming up as well, guys, for just chat. Guys, if you're watching all the way through on this, make sure you smash that like button. Turn on those post notifications. We do this every single Friday, and we got some pretty big updates that will be disclosing with you guys coming into the following weeks. Me and Sam will be definitely sharing this to Twitter and stuff. I want to cross-platform this and go live on Twitter with you as well when we do these shows. And just these in-depth discussions. I do think we should do a play-to-play scene because I think what we need to do with the whether it's state senate or just Senate positions or anything that's going in with these re-elections, really I know my audience, I would imagine 99% of them only understand presidential primaries. They don't understand anything else that takes place in this game from a district level. So, it'd be really good for us to go over the key levels, like whether it's New York, it's Virginia, it's California, at least the major key figures. and just show how that process works, do kind of a bracket system and explain, okay, if this person is elected here, this is going to restructure the race and the Republican
Mhm.
Party in this entire, in this entire country, because it's county by county, et cetera. So that would be really, I think, beneficial for our communities.
What I'm gonna do after this live is done soon is we'll go over how you can track some of these bigger elections and then dive into each person. And then we should just do a live, probably via computer, while we share some of those maps and
Yeah.
just do live research on who's running and where and discuss the impact. We could probably spend like 10 minutes on each state. And some states will have both their senators running.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that will be really beneficial. And then we should honestly just be reporters, because journalism's dead in America, and just go through each and every single candidate. Because
Yep.
every single candidate, guys, has a skeleton in their closet, and we will find
Yep.
one.
That's right. That's
Minus
right.
the CIA agent. He's got nothing. He's just a goody two shoes, and he's really good. He's a patriot.
Correct. Correct. And if we say differently, this live is gonna get canceled.
Got a red dot. You just see
That's
like
right.
a laser.
Yeah, just on the forehead. I know. That's right. Well, that's all we got for today. Thank you guys for who attended. This has been Beyond the Headlines. You can join us again next Friday, same time, same place, and we will see you there. So thank you again, Josh, for joining.
Thanks, guys.